All right, so we have got this beautiful 997 in right now. It's an 05. We've removed the transmission and we're gonna do an IMS bearing. This car is eligible for the IMS bearing replacement. While we had this apart, a couple things to note. There was an oil leak inside the bell housing. We'll talk about that in a second. We removed the clutch and the flywheel. The flywheel has lots of hot spots in it, tons of them, and the clutch is worn out. You can see right all the way up to that edge how it just gets flat right there. We've got our rivets pretty close. The clutch is I would say 70% worn, give or take. Maybe between 60 and 80% worn. So it doesn't have a whole lot of life left. Same thing over here with the pressure plate. Lots of heat has gone through this pressure plate. So I would recommend, this is a perfect time to replace this stuff because there is no labor charge to do any of it. The throwout bearing, you know, it sounds a little dry. This moves nicely on the shaft, so that's good. That could use to be cleaned up a little bit. This is where the leak is emanating from. Here is the rear main seal. This car is leaking from the rear main seal all the way down onto the IMS shaft right here. Then it comes out of the bell housing and it drips down onto the ground right from here. This car is getting the IMS complete solution, so a plain bearing will be installed in place of this bearing. So the 05 car, you don't know if it has the large bearing inside or the small bearing, depending on the production date of the car. And then even still, you don't know. So if this is a 13 millimeter nut, then it is the small bearing. The bearing is removable. If it's the larger nut, like a 21 or 22 millimeter nut, the bearing is not removable without splitting the case. So we've verified that that is the 13 millimeter bearing. That means that the shaft of the IMS is an 8 millimeter shaft right there. So this is the removable IMS bearing. While we're in here, the customer decided to also do the air oil separator, which is right up in that corner. He also wants the starter cable replaced, which is right here. The starter cable goes up here, fishes around to the back of the starter and the back of the alternator. We're doing spark plugs and a water pump and a belt and a rear main seal. This car's in great shape. It's very nice and dry underneath. Other than this, once we fix that rear main seal, this thing will be completely dry. So let's open the IMS bearing. So it will get an IMS sticker. We place these stickers on the back of the engine lid right there, so that way everybody knows that it is replaced. This is gonna have the oil-fed plain bearing. So we're gonna machine the engine block case out to accept this oil line. Then we will install the oil filter housing just in place of the factory oil filter. The oil line comes right off of there and it goes right into the IMS bearing. And then here is the plain bearing set. There's that piece. And then here's the actual plain bearing. It replaces the roller bearing. And what's gonna happen is that bearing is just gonna go on there just like that. And it's gonna move just like that. The oil fed bearing is now that oil line. It's gonna go into the engine case, through the engine case, right into there. And then this side goes onto the oil filter housing, just like that. So this is about how far the IMS is away from the oil filter. That's it. It's going to go through the engine case and just be just like that. And it is now going to have what they call a plain bearing, no rollers, none of that. It's just it's a plain, it's like the literal meaning, a plain old bearing. So this car is going to get an IMS bearing. We're going to see if he wants to do a clutch and a flywheel now while everything's apart. Some transmission isolators and the starter cable, the air oil separator, and some spark plugs, and this thing's going to be good to go.